The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Windsor Castle as Princess Charlotte walked quietly through the grand corridors. At 9 years old, she had learned to navigate the palace with the grace expected of royalty, her small footsteps barely making a sound on the ancient stones. The young princess carried herself with natural dignity, her blonde hair neatly braided and her navy dress perfectly pressed, as befitting a member of the royal family. Charlotte had always found comfort in the castle's routine. The changing of the guard, the gentle chiming of the grandfather clocks, and the respectful nods from the staff created a world of predictable order. She particularly enjoyed her morning walks through the portrait gallery, where generations of her ancestors gazed down from golden frames, their painted eyes seeming to follow her movements with approval. On this particular morning, Charlotte was making her way to the library, where she planned to spend time reading before her afternoon lessons. The castle felt unusually quiet, with most of the family still at breakfast in the private dining room. She preferred these peaceful moments when she could explore freely without the constant presence of tutors, photographers, or official duties. As she turned the corner near the east wing, Charlotte noticed an unusual commotion ahead. Several staff members were gathered in hushed conversation, their voices barely audible but their body language suggesting something significant was happening. Among them stood James Morrison, a royal guard who had served the family for over 15 years. Unlike the other guards who rotated regularly, James had become a familiar presence in Charlotte's young life. James was known throughout the castle for his unwavering dedication and his gentle manner with the younger members of the royal family. Standing 6 feet tall with graying temples and kind brown eyes, he commanded respect, not through intimidation, but through his obvious competence and caring nature. Charlotte had always felt safe when James was on duty, knowing he watched over the family with genuine concern rather than mere professional obligation. The princess approached the group cautiously, her natural curiosity overcoming her usual reserve. As she drew closer, she could make out fragments of conversation that made her heart skip with concern. The staff members were discussing arrangements for her immediate departure from the castle, speaking in the careful, measured tones reserved for sensitive family matters. The queen consort has requested that arrangements be made, one of the senior staff members was saying quietly. Princess Charlotte is to be relocated to the country estate immediately. The decision has been made final. Charlotte felt a cold shock run through her small frame. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to understand what she was hearing while remaining unseen. The country estate was beautiful, but it was also isolated, far from her friends, her regular activities, and the life she had known. More troubling was the realization that this decision had apparently been made without consulting her parents. James Morrison stood slightly apart from the other staff members, his jaw set in a way that Charlotte recognized as his expression when he was deeply troubled. She had seen that look before, during difficult moments in the family's public life, but never directed at internal family decisions. His hands were clasped behind his back in his usual professional stance, but there was a tension in his shoulders that suggested inner conflict. "When is this supposed to happen?" James asked, his voice carefully controlled but carrying an undertone that made the other staff members glance at him uncertainly. "Within the hour," came the reply. "Her belongings are already being packed." The queen consort was quite specific about the timing. Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. An hour. She would be taken away from everything familiar within an hour, and apparently, no one had thought to discuss this with her or prepare her for such a dramatic change. The casual way the staff discussed her relocation, as if she were a piece of furniture to be moved at will, made her feel small and powerless in a way she had never experienced before. The young princess had grown up understanding that royal life came with unique challenges and expectations. She had accepted the constant scrutiny, the formal protocols, and the weight of representing her family in public. But this felt different. This felt like punishment, though. She could not think of anything she had done to deserve such treatment. As she listened, more details emerged from the staff conversation. The relocation was being presented as a temporary educational opportunity, a chance for Charlotte to experience a different environment and develop greater independence. But the hurried nature of the arrangements and the lack of family discussions suggested other motivations that the adults were not willing to voice openly. James Morrison's expression grew increasingly grim as he listened to the details. Charlotte had never seen him question orders before, but she could see the internal struggle playing out across his weathered features. His loyalty to the royal family was absolute, but his protective instincts toward the younger generation were equally strong. "Has this been discussed with the Prince and Princess of Wales?" James asked finally, his question hanging in the air with obvious significance. The uncomfortable silence that followed provided its own answer. Charlotte felt her world shifting beneath her feet as she realized that this decision was being made without her parents' knowledge or consent. The thought of being separated from her family by what amounted to deception made her feel sick with anxiety. The head of household staff, a stern woman named Mrs. Pemberton, who had served the royal family for decades, stepped forward with obvious authority. "The Queen Consort's instructions are clear," she stated firmly. "Princess Charlotte is to be prepared for departure immediately. A car will arrive shortly to transport her to the estate." Charlotte watched as James Morrison's posture stiffened further. She had never seen him challenge authority directly, but something in his demeanor suggested that this situation was pushing him beyond his usual boundaries of professional compliance. His years of service had earned him a unique position of trust within the household, and he clearly felt that trust was being violated. The other staff members began to disperse, moving with the efficient purposefulness that characterized all castle operations. But James remained motionless, his gaze fixed on some distant point as if he were weighing options that others could not see. Charlotte found herself holding her breath, sensing that something significant was about to happen. As the corridor began to empty, Charlotte made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of retreating to her room or seeking out an adult who might help her understand the situation, she stepped out from her hiding place and approached James Morrison directly. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Morrison," she said quietly, using the formal address that protocol required even in private moments. "I heard what they were saying about me going away." James turned toward her, and Charlotte saw her own concern reflected in his eyes. For a moment, the professional mask slipped, revealing genuine distress at the situation unfolding around them. He looked down at the young princess, taking in her obvious confusion and worry, and something seemed to crystallize in his expression. "Your Highness," he said carefully, glancing around to ensure they were not overheard. "Sometimes in life there are moments when doing what is right becomes more important than following orders without question." Charlotte did not fully understand the implications of his words, but she sensed their weight. James Morrison had served her family with distinction for many years, building a reputation for reliability and discretion that made him invaluable to the household. For him to even hint at questioning direct orders represented a significant departure from his usual behavior. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their quiet conversation. Mrs. Pemberton was returning with several other staff members, clearly intent on beginning the process of Charlotte's departure. James straightened to his full height, his hand moving unconsciously to adjust his uniform jacket in the gesture Charlotte had seen him make countless times before important duties. "Your Highness should return to her room now," James said formally, but his eyes conveyed a different message. "I believe there may be some developments in the current situation that require attention." Charlotte nodded, understanding that something was about to happen even if she could not predict what form it would take. As she turned to go, she heard James Morrison take a deep breath and step forward to intercept Mrs. Pemberton and her team. The princess paused just around the corner, unable to resist listening to what would unfold next. "Mrs. Pemberton," James said, his voice carrying new authority. "I need to speak with you about the arrangements for Princess Charlotte." The head of household staff stopped abruptly, clearly surprised by the guard's intervention. "Morrison, your concerns are noted, but the matter has been decided. The Queen Consort's wishes are to be carried out immediately." James Morrison stood his ground, and Charlotte could hear the steel in his voice when he responded. "With all due respect, Mrs. Pemberton, I believe there are protocols that have not been properly followed in this matter. Protocols that exist for the protection and welfare of all family members." The tension in the corridor was palpable as the two senior staff members faced each other. Charlotte pressed herself closer to the wall, understanding that she was witnessing something unprecedented in the carefully ordered world of royal service. James Morrison was not just questioning orders, he was preparing to take a stand that could define the rest of his career and potentially change the course of events for the entire family. Mrs. Pemberton's voice took on a warning tone. "Mr. says it?" "I guessed." "Morrison, I strongly advise you to remember your position and your duties." The Queen Consort's authority in household matters is absolute. But James Morrison had reached a decision that went beyond considerations of personal consequence. Looking directly at the woman who had just threatened his career, he straightened his shoulders and prepared to speak the words that would change everything for Princess Charlotte and potentially reshape the dynamics of power within the royal household itself. James Morrison looked directly into Mrs. Pemberton's eyes, his voice clear and unwavering as he delivered the words that would echo through the corridors of power. Princess Charlotte will not be leaving this castle today without the explicit knowledge and consent of her parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales. The silence that followed his declaration was deafening. Mrs. Pemberton's face went pale, then flushed with indignation as the full implications of his statement sank in. The other staff members stood frozen, uncertain how to respond to such an unprecedented challenge to the established hierarchy. "Mr. Morrison," Mrs. Pemberton said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You are directly contradicting orders from the Queen Consort herself. This is tantamount to insubordination of the highest degree." James remained calm, his years of military training evident in his composed bearing. "Mrs. Pemberton, I have served this family faithfully for 15 years. My oath was to protect and serve all members of the royal family, not to facilitate actions that could cause harm to a child who cannot protect herself." Charlotte, still hidden around the corner, felt her heart racing as she listened to the confrontation unfolding. She had never imagined that anyone would stand up to the household authority on her behalf, especially not in such a direct and potentially career-ending manner. Mrs. Pemberton stepped closer to James, lowering her voice to a dangerous whisper. "You forget yourself, Mr. Morrison. The Queen Consort has every right to make decisions regarding the children's education and living arrangements. Your role is to follow orders, not to question the wisdom of your superiors." "My role," James replied steadily, "is to ensure the safety and welfare of this family. Removing a child from her home environment without proper consultation or preparation does not serve those interests." The head of household staff was clearly struggling to maintain her composure. She had never faced such open defiance from a member of the castle staff, and the situation was rapidly moving beyond her ability to control through normal channels of authority. "The arrangements have been made," she insisted, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "The car will arrive in 30 minutes. And Princess Charlotte will be ready to depart. That is final." James Morrison shook his head slowly. "No, Mrs. Pemberton. That is not final. Not today." The quiet determination in his voice sent a chill through the assembled staff members. They all understood that they were witnessing something that would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. James was not just refusing orders. He was drawing a line that challenged the very foundations of how decisions were made within the royal household. Mrs. 14. Pemberton's face hardened with resolve. "Very well, Mr. Morrison. You leave me no choice but to report your insubordination directly to the Queen Consort. We shall see how long your career survives such blatant disrespect." "I understand the consequences of my actions," James replied calmly, "but I also understand the consequences of remaining silent when a child's welfare is at stake." Charlotte felt tears stinging her eyes as she listened to this man risk everything for her sake. She had grown up surrounded by people whose primary concern was following protocol and maintaining their positions. To witness someone prioritize her well-being over their career security was both overwhelming and deeply moving. Mrs. Pemberton turned on her heel and marched away, clearly intent on escalating the situation to higher authorities. The remaining staff members looked uncertainly between James and the direction she had taken, unsure of where their loyalties should lie in this unprecedented situation. James addressed them directly, his voice gentle but firm. "I suggest you all return to your regular duties. This matter will be resolved, but there is no need for anyone else to become unnecessarily involved." One by one, the staff members dispersed, leaving James standing alone in the corridor. Charlotte waited a moment before emerging from her hiding place, approaching the guard who had just sacrificed his career for her protection. "Mr. Morrison," she said softly, "thank you for what you just did. But I don't want you to get in trouble because of me." James looked down at the young princess, his expression softening with genuine affection. "Your Highness, sometimes standing up for what is right is more important than avoiding trouble. You should never have to apologize for someone else choosing to do the right thing. Charlotte nodded, though she still felt the weight of responsibility for the chaos that was about to unfold. What happens now? Now, James said thoughtfully, we wait to see how the family responds to learning the truth about today's events. I have a feeling that when your parents discover what was planned without their knowledge, there will be some very serious conversations taking place. As if summoned by his words, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the main entrance hall. James and Charlotte both turned toward the sound, recognizing the distinctive cadence of someone moving with urgent purpose through the castle corridors. Prince William appeared at the far end of the hallway, his face set with an expression Charlotte had rarely seen before. He was still wearing his morning riding clothes, suggesting he had received some kind of urgent communication and had rushed back to the castle immediately. "Charlotte!" he called out as soon as he spotted his daughter, relief evident in his voice. "Are you all right?" The princess ran toward her father, feeling the security of his presence wash over her like a warm embrace. "Papa, they said I had to leave today to go to the country estate. No one told me why, and they said it was already decided." Prince William's jaw tightened as he looked over Charlotte's head at James Morrison. "Morrison, I understand I owe you a debt of gratitude for preventing my daughter's departure without proper family consultation." James straightened to attention. "Your Royal Highness, I simply felt that proper protocols needed to be followed in matters concerning the welfare of family members." "Indeed," William replied, his voice carrying undertones that suggested deeper conversations would be happening soon. "Charlotte, why don't you go to your room for a few minutes while Mr. Morrison and I discuss the morning's events?" Charlotte nodded obediently, but paused before leaving. "Mr. Morrison, will you be all right?" The guard smiled at her concern. "Don't worry about me, Your Highness. Everything will work out as it should." As Charlotte reluctantly made her way toward her room, she could hear her father's voice taking on the formal tone he used for serious official business. She knew that James Morrison was about to face questions about his actions, and she could only hope that her father would understand the courage it had taken for the guard to make his stand. 20 minutes later, Charlotte was surprised to hear a gentle knock on her door. When she opened it, she found both her father and her mother, Catherine, standing in the hallway with expressions that mixed relief with barely contained anger. "Charlotte," her mother said, gathering her daughter into a warm hug, "we need to talk about what happened this morning." The family moved into Charlotte's sitting room, where Prince William closed the door and took a seat across from his daughter. Catherine sat beside Charlotte, maintaining the physical contact that both of them needed after the morning's stress. "First," William said carefully, "I want you to know that you are not going anywhere today, tomorrow, or any other day without full family discussion and agreement. What was planned this morning was done without your mother's and my knowledge, and it will not be happening." Charlotte felt a wave of relief so strong it made her slightly dizzy. "So I can stay here at the castle?" "You can stay exactly where you belong," Catherine said firmly, "which is with your family, in your home, attending your regular school and activities." William leaned forward, his expression serious but gentle. "Charlotte, I want you to understand something important about what happened today. Mr. Morrison made a very difficult decision when he chose to question the arrangements that had been made without our knowledge. Not many people would have had the courage to do what he did." "Is he in trouble?" Charlotte asked anxiously. Her parents exchanged a meaningful glance before William responded. "Mr. Morrison is meeting with senior family members this afternoon to discuss the morning's events. But I want you to know that his actions today demonstrated exactly the kind of loyalty and integrity that makes someone truly valuable to this family." Catherine squeezed Charlotte's hand reassuringly. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the people who care about us most are the ones willing to take risks to protect us." Morrison understood that what was happening wasn't in your best interests, and he was brave enough to speak up. Charlotte nodded, beginning to understand the larger implications of the morning's events. "Will things be different now?" William's expression grew thoughtful. "Yes, I believe they will be. Today has highlighted some issues with communication and decision-making that need to be addressed. Changes will be made to ensure that situations like this cannot happen again." The princess could hear the steel beneath her father's diplomatic words. She sensed that the confrontation between James Morrison and Mrs. Pemberton had triggered much larger conversations about power, authority, and the welfare of the younger generation within the royal family. Catherine stood up, smoothing Charlotte's hair with a tender gesture. "Why don't you spend some time reading while your father and I attend to some family business? We'll have lunch together afterward, just the immediate family." Charlotte understood that her parents needed to have adult conversations about the morning's events, conversations that would likely determine how similar situations would be handled in the future. As they prepared to leave her room, she felt compelled to say something that had been weighing on her heart. "Mama, Papa," she called out softly, "I hope Mr. Morrison knows how grateful I am for what he did, and I hope the family knows how lucky we are to have people who care enough to do the right thing even when it's hard." William paused at the door, looking back at his daughter with obvious pride. "I think, Charlotte, that message will be delivered very clearly in the conversations we're about to have." As her parents left the room, Charlotte settled into her favorite reading chair, with a sense of security she had not felt since the morning began. The crisis had passed, but she understood instinctively that its effects would ripple through the family structure for some time to come. James Morrison's single sentence had done more than prevent her unwanted relocation. It had forced a reckoning with issues of authority, communication, and the fundamental question of what was truly in the best interests of the royal children. 3 hours later, the entire atmosphere within Windsor Castle had shifted dramatically. Word of the morning's confrontation had spread through the staff quarters with the speed that only significant events could generate in such a close-knit community. Everyone understood that something fundamental had changed in the established order, though the full implications were still unfolding. James Morrison sat in the formal meeting room normally reserved for diplomatic conferences, facing a panel that included Prince William, senior members of the household staff, and representatives from the broader royal administrative structure. His uniform was impeccable, his posture straight, but those who knew him well could see the tension in his shoulders as he prepared to account for his actions. Prince William opened the proceedings with characteristic directness. "Mr. Morrison, we are here to discuss the events of this morning, specifically your decision to countermand orders from senior household staff regarding arrangements for Princess Charlotte." James met the prince's gaze steadily. "Your Royal Highness, I accept full responsibility for my actions. I understand that I acted outside the normal chain of command, and I am prepared to face whatever consequences are deemed appropriate." "Before we discuss consequences," William continued, "I would like you to explain your reasoning. What led you to take such an unprecedented step?" James took a measured breath before responding. "Sir, in my 15 years of service to this family, I have learned to recognize the difference between orders that serve the family's best interests and orders that may serve other purposes. This morning's arrangements for Princess Charlotte's sudden departure appeared to fall into the latter category." Mrs. Pemberton, seated at the far end of the conference table, shifted uncomfortably. Her earlier confidence had been significantly shaken by the rapid escalation of events and the obvious displeasure of the immediate royal family members. "The concerns I had were multiple," James continued. "First, the secretive nature of the arrangements suggested an attempt to circumvent normal family consultation processes. Second, the haste with which the departure was being organized indicated that someone wanted to prevent adequate discussion or potential objection. Third, and most importantly, no consideration seemed to have been given to Princess Charlotte's own welfare or emotional preparation for such a significant change." William nodded slowly, his expression indicating that James's assessment aligned with his own understanding of the situation. "What specifically made you decide that intervention was necessary?" "When I realized that Princess Charlotte had overheard the staff discussions and was clearly distressed by what she was learning," James replied, "I understood that someone needed to advocate for her interests. In that moment, my duty to protect the family overcame my obligation to follow orders without question." The room fell silent as the implications of his words settled over the assembled group. James Morrison had articulated what everyone present understood, but few would have had the courage to voice: that blind obedience could sometimes conflict with genuine service to the royal family's welfare. Prince William leaned back in his chair, studying the guard who had risked everything for his daughter's sake. "Mr. Morrison, your actions this morning prevented what could have been a significant family crisis. However, they also highlighted serious breakdowns in communication and decision-making processes that need to be addressed. Mrs. Pemberton finally found her voice, though it lacked its earlier authority. Your Royal Highness, I was simply carrying out instructions as they were given to me. The Queen Consort was very specific about her wishes regarding Princess Charlotte's immediate relocation. William's expression hardened slightly. Mrs. Pemberton, that raises the question of why such significant decisions regarding my children were being made and implemented without consulting their parents. That is a procedural failure of the highest order. The head of household staff looked genuinely uncomfortable as she realized that her position in the conflict was far more precarious than she had initially understood. Sir, I assumed that appropriate family consultations had already taken place. Assumptions, William said quietly, are dangerous when they involve the welfare of children. They are particularly dangerous when they result in secretive arrangements that circumvent established family decision-making processes. James Morrison watched this exchange with careful attention, understanding that his confrontation with Mrs. Pemberton had exposed much larger issues within the household management structure. His single sentence of defiance had triggered an examination of how power was exercised and how decisions affecting the royal children were made. William turned his attention back to James. Morrison, while I appreciate your concern for Charlotte's welfare, your actions this morning also placed you in direct conflict with established hierarchies. How do you suggest we resolve this situation moving forward? James had clearly given this question considerable thought. Your Royal Highness, I believe the morning's events demonstrate the need for clearer protocols regarding decisions that affect family members, particularly the children. Perhaps a system that ensures parental notification and consent for any significant changes to living arrangements or daily routines. That is precisely what will be implemented, William said firmly. Additionally, there will be new procedures requiring that any major decisions affecting family members be documented and approved through multiple levels of oversight. Pemberton shifted in her chair, clearly understanding that these changes would significantly alter her authority within the household structure. The days of implementing orders without question or verification were coming to an end. William continued, addressing the room as a whole. What happened this morning exposed weaknesses in our family's internal communication systems. Those weaknesses could have resulted in genuine harm to a child who depends on us for protection and stability. That is unacceptable. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Morrison, your intervention prevented that harm. While your methods were unconventional, your judgment proved sound. That demonstrates the kind of thinking and initiative that makes someone truly valuable to this family. James felt a wave of relief, though he maintained his professional composure. The prince's words suggested that his career would survive his morning's defiance, but more importantly, they indicated that the systemic issues he had identified were being taken seriously. However, William added, we cannot have staff members making unilateral decisions about when to follow orders and when to resist them. That would create chaos. Instead, we need better systems that prevent inappropriate orders from being issued in the first place. Over the next hour, the meeting developed into a comprehensive review of household procedures and decision-making protocols. James Morrison found himself transformed from a defendant justifying his actions into a consultant helping to design better systems for protecting the royal family's interests. Mrs. Pemberton's role in the discussion became increasingly limited as it became clear that her failure to verify the appropriateness of the morning's orders had created the crisis that James had been forced to resolve. The power dynamics within the household staff were clearly shifting as a result of the day's events. As the formal meeting concluded, Prince William asked James to remain for a private conversation. When the room had cleared, the prince's formal demeanor relaxed into something more personal and direct. James, he said, using the guard's first name for the first time in their professional relationship. I want you to know that Catherine and I are deeply grateful for what you did this morning. Charlotte has spoken about how safe she feels when you are on duty, and today proved that her trust is well placed. James felt the emotional weight of the day finally beginning to affect him. Sir, I have a daughter of my own. I could not stand by and watch Princess Charlotte be frightened and confused by arrangements she did not understand. William nodded with understanding. The courage you showed today is exactly the quality we need more of in this family's service. I want you to know that your position here is not only secure but enhanced by your actions. Thank you, sir.
That means more than I can express. There is one more thing, William added.
I am creating a new position within our security structure focused specifically on the welfare and protection of the children. It would involve working directly with Catherine and me to ensure that their interests are always properly represented in family decisions. Would you be interested in such a role? James Morrison straightened with surprise and gratitude. Your Royal Highness, I would be honored to serve in whatever capacity you feel would be most beneficial to the family. Then it is settled. Your new role will be formalized within the week, along with the new protocols we discussed today. As James left the meeting room, he encountered Charlotte in the corridor outside. She had clearly been waiting for him, her young face showing the anxiety she had been carrying all afternoon. Mr. Morrison, she said quickly, are you all right? Are you still going to work here? James smiled at her concern, feeling the full weight of the day's events transformed into something positive and meaningful. Your Highness, I am not only still working here, but I have been given an even more important job helping to take care of you and your siblings. Charlotte's face lit up with relief and happiness. Really? That's wonderful. Yes, it is, James agreed. And Princess Charlotte, I want you to remember something important about today. When someone stands up for what is right, even when it is difficult or scary, good things usually follow. Today proved that truth can be more powerful than authority when it is spoken with courage. Charlotte nodded solemnly, understanding that she had witnessed and been part of something significant. Mr. Morrison, will you teach me how to be brave like that when I need to be? James Morrison looked down at the young princess who had inadvertently triggered a transformation in her family's internal dynamics and smiled with genuine warmth. Your Highness, I think you already know more about courage than you realize. Today, you trusted the right person to help you, and that took bravery too. As evening fell over Windsor Castle, the events of the morning had indeed changed everything. New protocols were being drafted, power structures were being realigned, and most importantly, a clearer understanding had emerged of what it meant to serve the royal family's true interests, rather than simply following orders without question. James Morrison's single sentence had accomplished more than preventing Charlotte's unwanted departure. It had forced a reckoning with fundamental questions about authority, responsibility, and the welfare of those who depend on others for protection. The royal guard who had risked his career for a frightened child had ultimately strengthened the very institution he served, proving that sometimes the most loyal thing one can do is refuse to obey.